For decades, David Gilmour kept one truth locked deep inside, a secret so personal, so painful, he swore he'd never speak of it publicly. But now, at 79, the legendary Pink Floyd guitarist is finally breaking his silence. What he reveals isn't just emotional, it's devastating. Fans who thought they knew everything about him are left speechless. This isn't about fame, music, or legacy. It's about the moment one man finally tells the truth he's carried alone for a lifetime. David Gilmour's story didn't start with noise or chaos. It started with silence. He grew up in Cambridge in a smart, educated family. His father was a scientist, his mother a teacher. On the surface, everything looked fine. There was food on the table, books on the shelves, a quiet, orderly home. But what was missing mattered more. There wasn't much warmth. Conversations were short. Emotions stayed hidden. For a sensitive child who wanted to feel seen and heard, that kind of silence can hurt more than shouting. Even with siblings around, David often felt alone. Family dinners were quiet, no big talks, no deep connections, just space, waiting. He later described his childhood not as cruel but distant, and that distance slowly shaped him. He learned early that what he felt inside didn't always have a place to go, so it stayed there, building up. Everything changed when he was about 10 years old, when his mother gave him a guitar. She probably thought it was just a hobby, something to keep him busy. But for David, the guitar became something else entirely. It became his voice. He didn't take lessons. He didn't have a teacher sitting beside him. He sat alone in his room, under a small light, teaching himself how strings could bend, how notes could hang in the air, how silence between sounds could say just as much as noise. While other kids were outside, David stayed in, playing the same notes over and over again, not to impress anyone, but to feel something, to release what he couldn't say out loud. Every slow bend, every quiet pause came from that lonely space. That's where his style was born. He wasn't interested in speed or flash. He learned that one note, played with feeling, could say more than 100 rushed ones. That early silence never left him. It followed him into adulthood, into his music, into the way he played. His guitar never screamed. It spoke. It waited. It made people listen. What once felt like emptiness became his greatest strength. He turned a quiet childhood into a sound the whole world would one day recognize, proving that silence, when you know how to use it, can become a powerful voice. When David Gilmour joined Pink Floyd in the late 1960s, it wasn't the dream-come-true story people might expect. He didn't step into the band during a golden moment. He stepped in because his friend, Syd Barrett, the heart and original spark of the group, was falling apart. Drugs and mental illness had changed Syd almost overnight. The brilliant, funny, creative guy David once knew had become distant, lost in his own world. Watching someone he cared about unravel like that was heartbreaking. But when the band asked David to step in and help, he said yes. Not to steal the spotlight, not to take over, but to keep the music going when Syd no longer could. In the beginning, it was awkward. David wasn't just filling a spot, he was filling a silence, trying to keep alive something that was already breaking. There were moments when they still picked Syd up for rehearsals, hoping maybe he'd snap back. But he didn't. And one day, they just stopped picking him up. That decision haunted David for years. Even as the band moved forward, a part of him stayed behind with the friend they left in the shadows. But the music didn't stop. In fact, it got louder, bigger. By the 1970s, Pink Floyd had exploded into something massive. Albums like Metal and Dark Side of the Moon didn't just succeed. They became part of culture itself. Suddenly, the band wasn't just a group of musicians. They were a movement. Dark Side of the Moon stayed on the charts for over a decade. Fans didn't just listen to it, they felt it. The lyrics, the sounds, the emotion. It touched something deep. At the center of all that emotion was Gilmour's guitar. He wasn't flashy or loud. His playing had space, feeling, control. He could hold a single note for 5 seconds and still break your heart. His voice, calm, thoughtful, smooth, carried the weight of the songs with a quiet power. When you hear Breathe or Time or Comfortably Numb, it's his voice and guitar that pull you in and hold you there. But while the outside world saw magic, the inside of the band was turning into a storm. The bigger the band got, the heavier everything felt. Fame brought pressure. Pressure brought conflict. And conflict brought cracks that no one could fully repair. Roger Waters, the band's bassist and main lyricist, was becoming more dominant. His writing was sharp, personal, political, and often angry. His vision for the band grew darker with each album. David, on the other hand, leaned more toward melody and emotional depth. He wanted to make music that healed, not just music that screamed. At first, this balance worked. Waters brought the fire, Gilmour brought the soul. That's how songs like Comfortably Numb were born. Roger's raw lyrics meeting David's soaring solos. It was beautiful, but also fragile. By the time they were making The Wall, the tension was everywhere. Recording sessions turned into battles. Decisions were argued over. Trust was breaking. Roger wanted control. David wanted balance. They both wanted the band to be great, but they no longer agreed on what great meant. During The Wall, things hit a breaking point. Roger pushed keyboardist Richard Wright out of the band. David didn't stop it, and later admitted that not defending Rick was one of his biggest regrets. The album was a massive success, but the price was high. Behind the powerful music was a group of people barely holding on. Eventually, the damage was too deep. In the early 1980s, Roger left the band, claiming Pink Floyd couldn't go on without him. He tried to shut the whole thing down, even taking legal action to end the band completely. For David, it felt like betrayal. He wasn't just watching a band fall apart, he was watching a part of his identity being erased. After everything he'd given, everything he'd carried, someone was trying to tell him it didn't count. But David didn't give up. He believed Pink Floyd could continue. He released A Momentary Lapse of Reason in 1987 under the band's name. It wasn't easy. Critics were unsure, fans were divided, but the stadium still filled, the music still mattered. And slowly, people began to accept that Pink Floyd wasn't gone, just different. Still, the weight of the past never fully went away. Every new album was compared to The Dark Side of the Moon or Wish You Were Here. Every performance was measured against the band's golden age. David was constantly being asked to live up to something that had happened decades earlier. Even his victories came with shadows. Was it really Pink Floyd without Roger? Was this the same band, or just a tribute to something lost? Over time, David came to understand something painful, that success can be just as heavy as failure. The legacy of Pink Floyd was huge, but it wasn't easy to carry. It was filled with ghosts. The ghost of Syd Barrett, whose breakdown started it all. The ghost of Rick Wright, who passed away in 2008. And the ghost of the young man David used to be. The one who just loved playing guitar in his room. Before the fame, before the fights, before the pressure. In many interviews, David has admitted that he often struggled with the expectations placed on him. He knew people wanted magic every time he picked up a guitar. They wanted to hear the past, relive their youth, feel that same spark. But he was just a man, getting older, doing his best to stay true to the music, without becoming a prisoner of it. Despite it all, he kept going. He didn't run from the legacy, he shaped it. He released The Division Bell in 1994, and in 2014, the band's final album, The Endless River, built from Rick Wright's old recordings. That last album wasn't about chart success. It was a quiet goodbye, a tribute, a final bow. Through all the pain, David never lost his voice, not the one in his throat, but the one in his guitar. He played with heart, he carried the emotion, he stayed calm in the storm. And though the band that started as a group of friends became something much more complicated, David remained the soul that gave it depth. Looking back now, the journey through Pink Floyd wasn't just a music career, it was a lifetime of battles, beauty, grief, and growth. And somehow, through all of it, David Gilmour never stopped creating, never stopped feeling, never stopped turning the noise and silence around him into something that could touch the world. He didn't just survive Pink Floyd, he kept its spirit alive, even when everything else was falling apart. In the middle of all the noise, the sold-out shows, the historic albums, and the weight of Pink Floyd's legacy, David Gilmour lived another quieter story, one filled with love, heartbreak, mistakes, and the kind of healing that doesn't happen on stage. Fame may have made him a legend, but it was life outside the spotlight that truly shaped the man he became. In the 1970s, just as Pink Floyd was exploding into global superstardom, David fell in love with Virginia Ginger Hazenbane. She was a model and an artist, creative, smart, full of energy. To the outside world, their life seemed like a dream. A famous musician, a beautiful partner, and the thrill of success. They got married and started a family, raising 4 children together: Alice, Claire, Sarah, and Matthew. At first, it was a warm and full life. David adored being a father. He talked often about how the chaos of touring was balanced out by the peace of coming home to his kids. He found real joy in the little things: bedtime stories, watching them grow, hearing their laughter fill the house. But fame, as always, has a price. The endless demands of Pink Floyd, the recording sessions, the touring schedules, the creative fights began to wear down his marriage. David was often gone, not just physically, but emotionally. The distance grew slowly, day by day. It wasn't about betrayal or scandal. It was just that the life they were building started to crack under the pressure of the world around them. By the late 1980s, the marriage was falling apart. In 1990, they divorced quietly. No headlines, no drama, just the quiet, painful end of something that had once felt like home. For David, the divorce hit hard. He lost more than a relationship. He lost the daily connection to his children. They lived primarily with Ginger after the split. And although he remained a loving and involved father, he missed out on the everyday moments, the school pickups, the dinnertime jokes, the messy, beautiful chaos of home life. And that absence left a wound. Friends who saw him during that time said he seemed different, more reserved, more distant. He could still stand in front of thousands and bring them to silence with a single note, but behind closed doors, he was a man learning how to live with regret. He once said that all the fame in the world couldn't replace the feeling of a child's hug at the end of a long day. That kind of truth doesn't come easy. It's learned through loss. But life has a strange way of offering second chances, sometimes when you least expect them. In the early 1990s, David met Polly Sampson. She wasn't a fan chasing a rock star. She was a journalist, a novelist, and a woman with her own voice. She had her own past, her own pain, and her own strength. And she saw David not as a legend, but as a man. A man who had lived through storms, who had made mistakes, but who still had something real to give. From the beginning, their connection was different. It wasn't built on excitement or fantasy, but on understanding. Polly challenged David. She grounded him. She wasn't afraid to speak her mind, and she gave him the kind of honesty he didn't know he needed. They fell in love slowly, deeply, fully. In 1994, they got married. It wasn't just the start of a new marriage, it was the start of a new life. Together, they built a blended family. Polly had a son, Charlie, and together they had 3 more children: Gabriel, Romany, and Joe. The house that had once felt quiet and distant was now alive with voices, laughter, and the daily chaos of raising a big family. David was older now, more present, more patient. He had learned from his past, and he brought all that wisdom into his new role as a husband and father. But Polly was more than a partner in life. She became a partner in music, too. She began writing lyrics for David's solo albums, starting with The Division Bell and continuing with On an Island and Rattle That Lock. Her words gave voice to his melodies. Her writing brought a new layer of intimacy and honesty to his music. They worked side by side, David with his guitar, Polly with her pen, turning real-life emotion into sound. Their home became a place of creativity and comfort. Friends who visited said David seemed happiest not on stage, but sitting in the kitchen with a cup of tea, talking with his kids, or playing guitar while Polly scribbled lyrics nearby. He had found something rare, not just love, but a life where he could truly be himself. No pressure, no spotlight, just peace. And that peace showed up in his music. His solo albums weren't chasing hits or fame, they were quiet, reflective, full of longing, hope, and healing. These weren't records made for stadiums. They were made for living rooms, for late nights, for quiet walks by the sea. The guitar was still there, still beautiful, but it wasn't trying to impress anymore. It was just telling the truth. That's the power of second chances. David didn't get to rewrite his past. He didn't erase the pain or the regrets, but he did build something new, something strong. He became the kind of father he always wanted to be, the kind of husband who listens, the kind of man who can stand in the silence and feel at peace. He's talked often about how much Polly changed his life, not by fixing him, but by helping him rebuild himself. She gave him a mirror and a pen, and through her love, he found a way to forgive himself, to start again. Now, as he gets older, surrounded by grandchildren and the hum of a full house, David Gilmour lives a quieter life. He walks along the Sussex coast. He gardens. He plays music not for millions, but for himself and for the people he loves most. And in those quiet moments, the man who once felt like a ghost in his own home has finally found what he was always searching for, a place to belong. This chapter of his life isn't about platinum records or roaring crowds. It's about warmth, connection, being there, and that more than any solo might just be his greatest achievement. Because in the end, the real victory isn't what you build under the spotlight. It's what you build when no one's watching. David Gilmour has spent most of his life surrounded by sound. Sound that shaped generations. Sound that filled stadiums. Sound that turned into history. But the deeper truth of his story, the part that most people don't see, has always been about silence. Not the silence of failure or emptiness, but a different kind. The kind that gives space for meaning, for reflection, for something real to take shape. His legacy is not just built on what he played, it's built on what he didn't play, on what he felt, and what he taught the world to feel in return. David never chased the spotlight. He didn't jump around the stage or shout into microphones. He let his guitar speak for him. And somehow, that quiet voice carried farther than any scream ever could. He understood early on that music didn't need to be loud to be powerful. It just needed to be honest. He made space in his music, room for people to breathe, to think, to hurt, to heal. And that's what made him different. While others filled their songs with noise, David left room for silence to exist. His solos weren't just impressive, they were emotional conversations. One long, aching note from him could say more than 1,000 words. That sense of space came from his earliest years, from a childhood filled with distance and quiet, from family dinners that felt cold, from feelings that didn't have a place to land. So he gave them a place, in music. Every bend of a string, every pause between chords was a way to turn inner silence into something that could be shared. And it worked. People connected, not just because of the technical skill, but because they felt something deeper in his playing, a kind of truth that didn't need to be explained. But legacy isn't just about music, it's about choices. And over time, David's choices became just as meaningful as his songs. In 2019, he made one that shocked the music world. He sold over 120 of his guitars, including the legendary Black Strat, the same guitar that shaped Comfortably Numb, Shine On You Crazy Diamond, and Echoes. That guitar was more than wood and strings. It was part of history. But he let it go. Not for profit, not for attention. He donated all $21.5 million from the auction to a climate charity called Client Earth. He simply said, "My guitars served me well. Now it's time they serve the planet." That quiet act said everything. Fame had never changed him. He didn't hold on to the past like a trophy. He used it as a way to give forward. His legacy in that moment became about more than music. It became about responsibility, about using what you've been given to help others, even if it means letting go of what once defined you. And maybe that's the key to understanding him. While many rock stars tried to stay forever young, David accepted time. He didn't fight aging. He embraced it. He didn't need to stay in the spotlight. He found peace in stepping back. He now spends his days in Sussex, living quietly with Polly and their family. He walks by the sea. He gardens. He records music on his houseboat studio, Astoria, not because he has to, but because he loves to. He plays for the joy of it, not for the charts. But when he does perform, those rare, beautiful moments when he takes the stage, the world still stops. A single note still pulls thousands into complete silence. That's what makes him timeless. Not just because of what he's done, but because of what he still gives when he plays. He's not chasing the past. He's honoring it. David's solo albums in later years, On an Island and Rattle That Lock, sound nothing like stadium rock. They're softer, more thoughtful, filled with lyrics from Polly and melodies that feel like quiet confessions. These albums aren't for dancing or shouting. They're for sitting with, for thinking, for remembering. He doesn't need to prove anything. These songs come from a place of experience, a man who's seen joy and grief, loss and love, and who now knows how to turn all of that into music. His legacy is also in the lives he's touched. Fans often say they found comfort in his music when nothing else worked. that his solos helped them through heartbreak, grief, or long nights alone. He never promised answers, but he offered something just as valuable: understanding. He gave people a space to feel, to stop, to breathe. And in a noisy world, that's rare. What makes David Gilmour truly remarkable is that he never tried to be a hero. He never chased headlines. He simply played, lived, loved, lost, and played again. And through it all, he stayed true to something most artists lose along the way: himself. Now at 79, his legacy is clear. He's not just a guitarist, not just a rock star. He's a reminder of what music is really for. Not just entertainment, not just fame, but connection, emotion, memory, reflection. He turned silence into sound, and sound into something that lasts. And maybe that's what people will remember most, not just the albums or the tours, but the feeling of hearing one of his solos late at night when the world is quiet and everything suddenly makes sense for a moment. That's the gift he gave, and it will echo long after he's gone. David Gilmour's story is a quiet one, not because it lacked meaning, but because it was built in the spaces between, in the silence, in the choices, in the notes that hung in the air just long enough to break your heart and heal it at the same time. His legacy isn't just in the music we play, but in the way it teaches us to listen, not just to sound, but to life.